Hello P6, it's time for us to think about Friday's maths. So what we're going to do today is, we're going to start with our warm-up, and today's warm-up is all to do with our 4 rules of number. So what I want you to do is download our number warm-up, and you will see that you've got 2 long multiplication sums to do. You've got an adding sum, a takeaway, and 2 dividing sums. On the website there is a help sheet for your multiplication tables and for your dividing facts. And if you've forgotten how to do long multiplication, then why don't you go and download the long multiplication video that we did a couple of weeks ago, and that will help you remember how to fill in a long multiplication sum. Now today's main task is all to do with problem solving, and last week for problem solving we were thinking about Mr. Armstrong going to the shop getting 80p in change, and when he got his 80p in change he was given less than 7 coins. And what you had to do was work out how many possible ways there were to make 80p using less than 7 coins. Do you remember doing that last week? If you weren't able to do that lesson, why don't you go back, click on the link and go back and watch that lesson? Because in that lesson, we were learning how to find all the possible answers, and we were also thinking about how to organise those answers. So if you didn't manage to do that last week, why don't you begin with that today? For today's problem solving lesson, we're going to think about a young lady called Susan. And we can see Susan sitting here in our picture. And Susan is using, for her maths, what's called an abacus. Do you remember using something like this when you were further down the school? An abacus is made up of, this one's made up of thousands, hundreds, tens and units, spikes on our abacus. And what you do is you add beads onto your abacus to make different numbers. Now I'm going to use some counters on this one. So if I took 3 counters and I put my 3 counters onto the abacus, well, I would have shown the number 3000 because I have got 3 in the thousands, 0 in the hundreds, 0 in the tens and 0 in the units. So I would have shown 3000. I could move those 3 counters around. So what I could do is I could maybe leave 1 in the thousands, put 1 of them in the hundreds, 1 in the tens, nothing in the units. So what would that number be now? 1110. There's nothing in the units. Now, Susan gave herself a challenge. She decided that she wanted to make as many numbers as she could just using these 3 beads. So her challenge is to see how many different numbers that she will be able to make just using 3 beads. And this is what you're going to be working out in your problem solving task today. Because what we're going to do is we are going to use an abacus recording sheet to try to fill in the different ways that Susan could make her numbers using just 3 beads. Now, what she could do is she could start off with, as we did there a moment ago, putting all 3 beads in the thousands. So if I drew on 1 bead, 2 beads, 3 beads onto my abacus, I would have made the number 3000 because I've got 3 in the thousands, no hundreds, no tens and no units. I'm going to try and work systematically, which means I'm going to just try and move 1 counter at a time. So if I've got 3 counters in the thousands, in my next one, what if I keep 2 of those counters in the thousands, but I take 1 of them and move it into the next column? In this abacus, I've still got 3 beads, but now I've got 2 in the thousands, 1 in the hundreds, none in the tens, none in the units. So what number have I made now, P6? Well, I've made 2100, and there's nothing in the tens and the units, so I've made 2100. Are there any other ways that I could do it with 2 beads in the thousands? Well, if I keep those 2 there, in this one I put the 1 in the hundreds. Is there anywhere else I could have put that 1? Well, perhaps I could have put it in the tens. So I've got my 3 beads, 2 in the thousands, I've got 1 in the tens. So I've 0 in the hundreds, 1 in the tens, 0 in the units. So now I could say that I've got 2010. Are there any other ways that I could keep 2 in the thousands? Well, let's put the 2 back in the thousands. Now, I've had a 1 in the hundreds. I've had a 1 in the tens. Where else could I put a 1? Yeah, I could put 1 in the units, couldn't I? So what would this number show me? 2,000, no hundreds, no tens, 1 unit. So I would have 2001. So far I have found 4 possible answers. I've used 3 in the thousands. I've used 2 in the thousands. There are no more ways that I can use a 2 in the thousands. So now I'm going to put 1 into the thousands. What could I do with a 1 in the thousands? Well, I've still got 2 beads left. So perhaps I might put them both there into the hundreds. 1,200. P6. I want you, if you choose the higher level activity, to work on from there. I want you to see how many different possible answers you can come up with. Now, you have been given altogether 24 abacuses. You won't need all of them, but you will fill all of the first page, and you will definitely do quite a few on the second half of the page. But how many altogether will you be able to fill in? How many possible answers will you be able to find? Well, that's your challenge for today. I suggest you start off with the 5 that I've already done. So copy those onto your page first. And then can you keep working from there? You've got a 1 in the thousands, 2 in the hundreds. Could you take maybe one of those counters next and move it somewhere else? How many different answers can you get? Now, be careful that your answers are all different to each other. And as I say, you won't need all of these. There will be at least a couple of these abacuses that you won't need. But can you work out how many you do need? Now, that's the higher level challenge. If you choose to do the lower level challenge, you're still using 3 beads, but this time you're only working with hundreds, tens and units. So if you're working with 3 beads on a hundreds, tens and units abacus, then you would probably begin by putting your 3 beads all into the hundreds. So if they're all there, then that number would be 300. What if I left 2 of them there? So there would be 200. Where could I put the other bead? Well, maybe I would put it there. So there would be 210. How many ways can you find on your worksheet to use these 3 beads? How many different numbers, how many possible answers can you come up with? So no matter which grid you're using, no matter whether you're using the abacus which has 3 numbers on it, hundreds, tens and units, or whether you're using the abacus that's got 4 numbers, thousands, hundreds, tens and units, no matter what, you're putting 3 beads onto it and you're trying to see how many different answers you can create. Now, if you manage to do that, then there is an extension question and it's on the website. And this time, instead of Susan using 3 counters, she's going to use 4 counters. So imagine that you've got a 4th counter to go and use. And for your extension question, I want you to see, if you had Susan's 4 counters, how many even numbers can you make using 4 counters? Have a good think. That's a really tough question for you to have a go at. So P6, you've got your warm-up activity, you've got your problem-solving activity to do today. You've also got your reasoning challenge, which is all to do with fractions again today. Once you've had a go at those things, why don't you finish your week with either Play Live Maths. Oh my goodness, in school on Thursday, I was watching lots of our P6s who are in school playing the Play Live games. Oh my goodness, they were doing brilliantly. So why don't you challenge yourself today to see if you can get onto the Brooklands leaderboard in our Play Live Maths games. And also, perhaps have a go at Prodigy. Some of the work that's being done in Prodigy is outstanding, P6, so well done. Keep that up and let's try and make this a really good end to your week. Have fun.